Welcome to Detangle, where we untangle the complexities of life one conversation at a time. I'm your host, Dr. Kinjal Goel, a psychologist and a writer. We have a wonderful guest today and a very beautiful episode indeed. Our guest is Shreya Punj. Miss Punj, or the editor recommends as she is very fondly known, comes from the heart of the publishing world, having worked extensively with Penguin and HarperCollins. For me personally, no conversation is more exciting than one with a fellow reader. And we do have a fiery rapid fire at the end of the episode, so stay tuned. Welcome, Shreya. It's such a pleasure to have you with me on Detangle today.
Thank you so much, Kenjal. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm so happy that we're going to have this lovely conversation for all your listeners.
Well, let's get in. Tell our audience a little bit about your scope of work and your experience, Shreya.
So, right now, my scope of work is that I head e commerce at HarperCollins Publishers India. And this basically means that I'm responsible for getting us sales on any online platform. This could include Amazon, Quick Commerce, other websites that sell books. And that's essentially my job. Apart from this, I also have my Instagram handle called The Editor Recommends, as you mentioned in the intro as well, which sometimes ends up taking a backseat because of the large quantum of work one has at their job. Before this, I used to commission and edit books. I did this both at Penguin and HarperCollins. And that was one of the most transformative job experiences I've had because you get to take an idea with someone and build it and shape it into a book that thousands and thousands of readers will hopefully enjoy and love and connect with. So that's been my professional journey, so to say.
How lovely. But this is such a niche field, Shreya. What inspired you to take this on? Any inspiration early on in life?
So, most origin stories in creative fields are packaged as these beautiful epiphanies. But mine was more about pattern recognition. So I was in engineering college and I realized that in my third year that a job in TCS, Infosys, or any of the other companies that come for hiring wasn't something I wanted to do. And then I just saw that what combination of skills do I possess? And these included, if I said to myself, were analytical thinking, content understanding, and just a general awareness of where social trends are. So when I combined these with my love for books, the natural home was publishing. So it was more of an aptitude match than anything that makes it feel like I was inspired or I was led to this industry. Yeah, it was just very basic SWOT analysis.
It's so important, we've de-glamorized logical thinking and we've only romanticized these epiphanies. So I'm so glad somebody's, actually romanticizing now thinking straight. It really matters.
I really think it does because a lot of the content also we see now is very driven by what do you feel intuitively? No, there are logical steps that lead you to build the skill set, which we then later on called intuition. So I'm glad that you resonated with my thought process too.
Yes, because a lot of people nowadays, especially the younger generation, waits to achieve their passion only once they recognize it. So they want to go backwards, they want to begin with the end, find the passion and then work towards it. While a lot of us have started working in fields and then figured that, yes, this is what I'm passionate about.
Yep, absolutely. Very true.
Super. So let's delve into your social media space for a bit. It's my favorite. I've been following you for a while and that's how I found you.
Right.
But tell me more about it. How did this idea of hashtag India pick up the book take root? How's it going now?
So my social media actually started because I wanted more authors or people who dreamt of becoming an author understand what publishing was really about, because publishing from the outside can seem like a black box and it's very hard to find people whom you can speak with or get real information from. So that was the intention, and that's why it was called The Editor Recommends. Right. Then as it started growing is when I realized that, okay, people now seem to have sufficient information about the process. Let's reach out to a wider audience of people who aren't choosing to read. There's just this alienation of a lot of folks that happens when you glamorize reading as this exclusive, highbrow activity. And that's what I wanted to sort of get rid of. And that birthed India Pick Up the Book. It was also, again, a step of logical calculations that when you have a tagline or when you have a motto that's larger than yourself, then anybody can join in that. So it's not something that's just mine then. Anybody who chooses to pick up the book and happens to be Indian can join in this movement and feel like they're part of something bigger. So I really hope that it's done that, because the response from the audience was amazing. Lots of people started using the hashtag as well. And nothing brings me more joy than that.
How lovely. I remember you had put up some content recently saying that all of us treat books as if they have to be exclusive and, this highbrow thinking they have to be good content. And we have stopped talking about the fun books that we read, the chatpata books, the masala
Mm.
books, the ones that keep us hooked. And off late, I've been reading a book which is just like that. It's like this little break from a healthy diet when you go on to some junk food and really enjoy it.
Yeah,
And I said, this is important. You need these books which make you feel that, yes, this is pleasure, this is fun.
absolutely. I mean, that's like my lifelong agenda now, making people, remove this thing that books means some divine knowledge which will help you achieve what you want in life. Books are supposed to be fun, stories are supposed to be fun, just like how we think of Bollywood masala movies. And they can offer you a wide spectrum of, like you said, like a diet, right? Kisi din chips, kisi din salad, sab kuch khana chahiye.
Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about the market, Shreya. You see it so up close. Have you seen the demand of certain genres of book go up or down steadily?
So, we recently at work had a presentation by an organization that does data research for us. And it was very heartwarming because year on year, fiction sales in India are increasing by almost 20 to 30%, which is fantastic because when a society starts reading more fiction, they become more empathetic. And this has been proven by science as well, because you're putting yourself in the shoes of another. You're living a life that you may never actually experience yourself. Or you may develop a better understanding of your own situation through the eyes of another or through the words of another. And that change and that shift from only self-help nonfiction to a growing demand for fiction just makes me very, very happy. And the second thing is that amongst fiction, Indians are very explorative readers. There is a huge love for science fiction, for fantasy, and also a lot of just really good literary fiction. So this is the data we got, and I was smiling ear to ear.
How nice. This actually brings me back to a conversation I had with Javed Akhtar Saab on one of my episodes of Detangle.
Hmm.
And he said, what the country is enjoying in terms of songs, in terms of movies, says a lot about the country. So, similarly, when you say there's a shift in reading, it says a lot about us, a mentality, a universal consciousness, which is changing. So, it's really, really interesting to know.
I agree. I've actually heard that episode, that conversation you had with Javed Akhtar Saab. And what a wonderful conversation. I think everybody should listen to it because the kind of questions you asked him, brought out a side of him which I've not really seen in other interviews he may have done.
Thank you.
And again, he just opens up your mind to seeing art and our connection to it in so many different ways. So, yeah, loved it.
Absolutely. So, what is your personal favorite genre? Do you have one or do you just skip between genres?
No, I don't have a favorite genre, but if there's one kind of book blurb, like the information at the back of a book that will get me to buy it instantly, is French Woman, a book
Okay.
that's focused on her interiority, dark psychology with a hint of intrigue or thrill. So think of authors like Laila Slimani, Maud Ventura, Louise May, books by like these and books by women, especially from the French side of things. Yeah, I will buy and lap it up.
Have you read The Perfume Collector?
I have, yes. The Perfume Collector. I've also read Perfume, which is one of the most surreal, crazy works of art I have ever read.
Wow. Okay, lots of book names dropping in. I hope people pick up these books as soon as this episode is over.
Love it.
What do you prefer? Digital modes of reading like Kindle or audiobooks, or are you still old school with, paperback and hardback? What do you prefer?
I'm really format agnostic. I have a huge library of actual, like, physical copies of books, sometimes even multiple editions. But these days, because one spends so much time on the road or traveling, or you only get time to read when in bed, say at like 12 a.m., I
Right.
like Kindle because it's backlit. I like audiobooks because they make my travel so much easier, like genuinely enjoy and look forward to sometimes like a 15-minute jam just taki chapter khatam ho jaye. So, yeah. And I think these days, yes, digital integration of books on all my devices is a lifesaver because now I don't think I would have been able to like maintain my reading habit as well as I can right now.
I agree completely. I also prefer the Kindle for the simple reason it allows me to look up words very easily.
Yes, absolutely. And like even the highlighting of it. So, of course, you
Right.
can highlight a physical book, and I urge everybody to treat their books as they would their clothes. Like, use it. Like, it is your own thing to own. But a Kindle makes it so much easier to collate the notes, export it, keep it for ready reference. Because जब तक वो चीज़ बार बार देखोगे नहीं, तो आपको याद कैसे रहेगी, right? Our memory doesn't work in that photographic manner as much as
Correct.
we would have liked it to. So I really appreciate that. Like, so most of my books where I have found a phrase, a quote, something I really loved or resonated with, I have a little notes thing where I can copy paste it into. Very convenient.
Lovely. So even as a book club, we have a book club going on for the last 17 years here. And we always discuss what we read and we pick up a book to read. But I feel like when I'm reading digitally, I can share this with a lot more people. So, you share a highlighted quote online or on Goodreads and suddenly you have conversations going. So, which is a lot more fun.
Oh, yes. That is also such a great point. I mean, I don't tend to do that too often, but when I do, you suddenly have something that you can bond with someone over, which is not just like, oh, garmi kitni bad rahi hai.
Exactly. Brings me back to the point of empathy that you raised. That yeah, it does, it makes us bond, it makes us talk, it makes us believe that there are so many people enjoying the same thing worldwide.
Yes, absolutely.
Super. So, reading can calm a person, inspire a person, stimulate the brain, and like Enid Blyton always said, open a whole new world for readers. But this magic doesn't touch everyone. What do you feel is lacking? Is it exposure to the right books or time and attention span? What's going wrong?
Interesting. So, I'm going to be very blunt here. I think the magic of reading doesn't touch everyone because we've really made it very performative instead of personal. Like, we've created this false hierarchy where reading a classic somehow makes you more worthy than reading, say, romance or manga or a comic book. So when someone says they don't like reading, they often mean they don't like reading what's been prescribed to them. And this is specifically, I've noticed amongst people who've gone through the Indian education system, where everything is you learn, you perform, you get marks, and then your parents are happy with you. It's not about exploration. It's not about choosing what you want. And that's fine. I understand that when you're catering to a whole country's education needs, you need to have a format. But we don't, as a society, allow room for just experimentation. It has to have an end goal attached to it. So our risk taking becomes very limited. And that reflects even in reading. Reading also requires, I think, a level of interiority, which we largely as a society don't encourage. If I have an opinion, I will go and tweet about it. If I have seen something beautiful, I have to share it immediately. We don't keep anything for ourselves, and if we do, we're not awarded for it. So what we're awarding by likes and views and validation is that performative behavior. So I think these two issues, when they go simultaneously, is what makes people not want to pick up a book, because they think other readers are just peacocking, and B, because when they have in the past tried to read something which was different, they were probably told कि अरे ये थोड़ी ना असली किताब है, ये तो ऐसी comic book है, ये तो ऐसी है. So I think that's why
we do shame people for the books they read. You're right.
Yeah. So I think the magic isn't universal because we've really made it exclusive.
I recently had this beautiful experience where a friend of mine walked into my office and she saw my library and she said, "Oh my God, do you read all this?" I said, "Yes, and some more." And she said, "I've never picked up a book." And she's 42. And it took me a minute to understand what she was saying. She has never experienced the joy of reading. So I asked her a few questions, figured out, what area she was inclined towards, and picked up The Forest of Enchantments by Chitra Banerjee. And I gave it to her. I said, just read it, read 10 pages, 20 pages, tell me what you feel. And she messaged me a few weeks later and she said, "I can't believe I missed out on this all my life. And I can't wait to read more."
Yeah, but imagine like your psychologist friend asking you questions, understanding exactly what might you need and recommending a book. I mean, that's so cool. Like, I would love to have 10 sessions with you just so you can then tell me, "Oh, Shreya, why don't you read this?"
It's such beautiful moments books can bring now.
Absolutely.
So tell me, from the business side, as a young expert in publishing and marketing, what have been your greatest challenges?
I think the greatest challenge has been navigating an industry that's very prejudiced against its own success. So I'll tell you what it means. When a book becomes a bestseller, which means it has mass market appeal. And by the way, these are books that we need to survive financially. But when a book becomes too popular, there's this undercurrent of dismissal. Like, oh, it's selling well, but is it literature? As if readers' enthusiasm somehow diminishes a book's value, Just to say it what it is, it's elitism. And this sometimes runs really deep. Like whether I was presenting a book in acquisitions or I was a part of acquisition meetings, or when we're just having shop talk, over a drink, there's this undercurrent of this will sell really well, but is it going to be lasting literature? And what I find funny about this is that our obsession with legacy stems from nowhere, because most of the books we now consider classics were never written with that intention. Like, I'm sure Tolstoy वहाँ बैठ के ये नहीं सोच रहे थे कि हाँ, if I talk about Russian high society and my feelings and thoughts around it, 500 years later, the legacy will continue. I think when we become too obsessed with this legacy literature, we end up producing books which no one's really connecting with. And when we are looking down at books which bring us the most money, or readers who love those books, we are not staying true to ourselves, in the sense that if a reader picks up one book, they're very likely to enjoy it and pick up the second and then the third, and they will then evolve in what they think is a classic. So this elitism is something which I think we struggle with at all levels. I've also been there. I've also felt that, where I would say, I only read these books, and I would never be caught dead with a mass market paperback, huge success, bestseller. So it took me a lot of unlearning to get to this point where I'm like, the last book I read was a romance and it was really fun and it sold 1 million copies worldwide.
So, Russian literature reminds me of this book I read called The Anna Karenina Fix. I don't know if you've read that one.
I haven't. I am just going to note it down. Thank you very much.
And it just makes it so simple. It makes this heavy Russian literature. It breaks it down into bite-sized pieces, and it doesn't make you feel so dumb at the end of it. So it's a beautiful attempt. It's a beautiful book. It makes you understand that everything is not meant to be so difficult. We can simplify things.
Yeah, I agree with that viewpoint where simplification can help. But I also think that, like I said, there's a natural progression, just as in school, right? We start with our ABCs, and then by class 12, you're doing integration and Gaussian math. So there is that graph that you have to allow your brain. So first get into basic exercises like walking, and then go attempt your marathon or your 150 kg deadlift. Your first book can't be Anna Karenina, and you can't hope to take your dopamine-filled brain to a book that's supposed to be tense. It's supposed to be excruciatingly long, because that's the joy of it. That's the mountain you're choosing to climb. But if you attach shame to the rest, you're just walking or you can't do a deadlift, you're not actually healthy then. That's when you've lost the battle.
I agree completely. So during this process, of your social media work and your work in the publishing houses, has there ever been that one moment that simply made everything worthwhile? The pinnacle of joy, as it were?
I think there must have been many, but I don't think of life in this framework. For me, a moment is just that, a moment. And I'm usually baseline pay a happy person. So once a moment has been lived, and it's taken me some practice to get there, where I am genuinely in that moment, I tend to move on. I'll journal about it if it's made an impact, but next day it's a fresh new slate. Jo hoga dekha jayega. So I don't tend to collect my moments in that category ki, oh, this was my lowest point, this was my highest point. So as long as it's a healthy average.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Let me ask you something. I've been wanting to get into the conversation for a while now.
Yes, please.
So I see a lot of moms coming to me and asking me how can they get their children or even teens to read. Now, as a psychologist, my answer usually is for the parent to start reading first and to make books accessible in times of boredom. But from within the publishing world, what do you think? Are there any specific books or genres that can really help young new readers become regular readers? Specific recommendations that you have?
So for all the parents listening to this, I'm going to be super direct. Forcing good literature, what parents think of as good literature on children, is the fastest way to kill their love for reading. Just its depth. And we just spoke about in the previous few questions, that you have an industry that also has this hierarchy where we're celebrating literary fiction, looking down on genre fiction. And then we have parents who think and curate what they think their child should be reading. And children can sense authenticity. So if you're giving them a Ruskin Bond and saying Parlo, and then you're actually watching Netflix, they'll know that maybe this is not as great an activity as you make it out to be. So when you're trying to build your child's reading habit, no matter at what age, I think first is format. So let them go to a bookstore, let them pick out a comic, a graphic novel. They may even choose something as, simple as Chicken Soup for the Soul. 5-minute story, done. You felt something. Everything counts as long as they're enjoying it. And they're not going to be reading War and Peace. They're also not going to probably like any of the previous books, which is why new books are being introduced, right? अगर वही 5 किताबें पढ़ के सबका काम हो जाता तो वही चल रही होती. And second is, I think for teenagers who are now perhaps addicted to their phones, let them read something which is slightly forbidden. Like I remember this distinct memory. My librarian, I was in class 7. She let me roam around the library during a free period, and I went and discovered this stack of books which was marked for teachers only. I was like, okay, what are these teachers reading? And it was this author named Sidney Sheldon. I picked one up and I went to my librarian and said, I want to read what the teachers are reading. Maybe this will be helpful for me. And she looked astounded and she said, you know what? Okay, take it. So I took it home and it was lying in my bag. I started reading it at night. And my mom walked in to say goodnight. She saw I was reading a Sidney Sheldon from the school library, issued in my name. And she started laughing. And she said, but if you have any questions, don't come to me. Okay, go to your librarian only. So I said, okay, fine. Then I was like, what's going to happen? And yeah, as everybody knows, Sidney Sheldon is the gateway. Most people's gateways into understanding the biology of childbirth and what, and what adults do. So I read it. I loved it. And I felt such a thrill that my librarian thought I was mature enough. B, that my mom didn't scare me into thinking I had to hide it. But my dad, of course, she said, so I knew that it was also slightly forbidden, right? Like I was in on an adult secret. So let your kids read something which is slightly forbidden. Like anyway, they'll come across it. The internet is an absolutely disgusting, lovely, beautiful place. So
I like the hierarchy of words that you've used. Okay.
Yeah. So let them explore, man. Like it's fine. They're going to find out anyway. So if they do it through like a cheeky, sexy book and they feel like they have pulled a fast one over you, let them have that win. And I promise you, they might start with that, but they will move on to something much better very soon because reading is highly addictive. And finally, I think the last is that we think of Netflix or Prime or whatever as enemies to reading. But when these kinds of, billion-dollar companies, they choose to pick up a book and make a movie or a series about it, it's very natural for the child to then be like, oh, I'll also read the book. So you can enjoy a piece of content in 3-4 different formats. So I remember when Holly Jackson, her first book, it's called A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, was released as a Netflix special. She tracked and the sales of her physical books went up so much. And that was because only season 1 has been made, but there are 3 other books. So you've seen season 1, you want to know what happens. So you end up picking and reading all those books because now you've gotten hooked. And now you have a face, a place to think of when you're reading. So, your imagination is very well-rounded.
Very interesting. I didn't know about this. Very, very interesting.
Yeah. Also, you should definitely read Holly Jackson's really fun books because it's also centered around having a podcast to solve crime.
My daughters have these. I have teenage girls, so they have their own.
Amazing. So happy. So
I think. Sorry, go ahead.
And that was it pretty much. Those 3 things like let kids be, let them have fun. And don't force your choices upon what you think is right or wrong for them. Let them pick the book that they want. And if, for example, they don't like it, let that also be okay. Unless, of course, you're financially constrained, in which case I highly recommend going to secondhand bookstores or visiting markets which have that facility, or getting yourself a library card for them so that you don't feel any financial constraints, because books can be expensive. But yeah, regardless, I mean, it shouldn't be a punishing form of, books padho acha hota hai, but then when they actually start enjoying something which you don't approve of, you immediately start berating them. That's not cool.
This brings back such a strong memory of something that my mom did with me when I was a child. And I never really gave it so much importance until now when we are talking. So,
Yeah.
what she would do is she would subscribe to these magazines for me. It could be Tinkle and Champak and something which had short stories. And she would hide it under the couch, under the cushion when it came in the morning, and wait for me to come back from school and have a little treat ready for me to enjoy with that magazine. So it was always a moment of joy when it arrived. And I was banned from reading fiction during my exams. And she would say, "You will not read because you will get hooked and you will not be able to study." And it meant nothing, honestly, but in my mind, it became a treat that I had to work towards. And it
How
was something that I
lovely.
really looked forward to. So at the end of my exams, she would take me shopping, she would take me to a bookstore, and I would get all the fiction books I wanted.
How amazing.
So
Was your
even
mom also
now,
a psychologist?
no, she's just my mom.
Damn. Smart
No,
lady.
but she did that, yeah. Everything was a treat. I mean, every book was a treat. And she had this when I grew up and became a teen. She would allow me to buy whatever book I wanted and she would pay for it. But if I didn't read or if I just started stacking my books, I had to pay for that book from my pocket money. So she said, "You buy what you read what you buy." Simple.
That is fantastic. Like, she taught you accountability and accounts so well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Utilization of an asset.
Totally.
Amazing. Same with
So,
my
yes.
mom. So my mom's a psychologist actually. She's a child counselor,
Oh,
and
lovely.
she's also a teacher trainer, etc., etc. So she really knows the ins and outs of the human mind. And she really wanted to raise a reader because she herself was one. Yeah, she introduced me. I don't know how, but that woman found some of the best books possible. Most of them are still with me, and she bought them when I was 6, so I'm 33 now. And she didn't do the reward method, but what we did have is she made it very clear that this is your budget for books. So when we go to the store, no choo choo chan chan. Within that budget, you know basic math. Whatever you want is yours. So when I walk in the store, I already know that I have about, say, 400 rupees back in, say, 2000. And I can choose maybe 2 books, which are really beautiful, or I can choose 2 really fat books, which will last me a longer time. So I would obviously end up picking really fat books just because
Yeah.
we did not have internet and we had to make those books last. And unfortunately, I was a very fast reader because, yes, books are highly addictive.
Hard relate. I so get this.
Exactly. So she would like have very clear boundary settings as a parent as well कि इससे ज़्यादा नहीं है पैसे में जो होता है. So then you also learn how to, do I want something pretty or do I want something which is going to give me most value for my buck? And sometimes I would end up choosing the pretty one because, it had really beautiful illustrations and came with a free crayon or something. But again, choices had
We
to be
learned
made.
ROI very early through this.
Very, very. Nothing like an Indian parent who is on a budget and wants to raise a well-rounded child.
I totally agree. So, talking about children and talking about moms,
Yes.
if you had the chance to give your younger self some advice, let's say a 14-year-old Shreya, what would you say?
Nothing. I don't think she would have heard me anyway.
I like this. I love this.
Yeah, I really don't think, I think some lessons life has to teach you. If you can imbibe them, great, but most people like reinventing the wheel, so let them. It's just something people go through. But I'll tell you one thing. The one piece of advice I give myself now, so every morning, like when I'm getting ready, I say this African proverb I found randomly on Pinterest, which says, cat that dreams of becoming a lion must lose its appetite for rats. And I love it. A, because it makes me smile. B, because I then feel very confident and sexy as cats tend to do. And C, it just tells me and tells my brain in the morning only that we are not being concerned about people whom we don't look up to. And if we want to be someone bigger, higher, more important than what we are currently in like the social hierarchy of things, we have to look upward. And that just really helps me stay because sometimes it can get very easy to see one random comment or one slightly, off the cuff remark by somebody that may put you in a bad mood. So instantly I'm like, I'm a cat who wants to become a lion, and this person is a rat to me. So
I
it just
love
really
it.
helps.
It's so cool.
Yeah,
It's
I'm
just
telling you,
so cool.
these animal kingdom proverbs from Africa are the best.
Let me tell you mine. I
Yes,
also have
please.
a favorite African proverb.
Oh my
It
God.
says, until the lion learns to write, the story will always glorify the hunter.
Yes. Oh, yes.
I love this.
Beautiful.
It just changes my perspective on every story, on everything, on every narrative, on everything that is happening around. It's all about your vantage point, where you are, what you're seeing. It's not the same for two people.
That is so true. And especially like, in the day and age we live right now, like who controls the media? Who gets to tell the story? Wow. This is something I vaguely remember we were taught in journalism school, but not as eloquently as you just put it, like in this pithier manner where, you can just carry it with you without it having to remember something really long. Love it.
Yeah. So
Love
this is
it.
why I love the internet. It makes everything easy.
It does.
It
I called
does.
it like a disgusting, beautiful place, right?
Yeah, so I'll take the beautiful part right now because, well, we connected over it. So I'm keeping
Yes,
it beautiful.
absolutely.
Okay, now here's a question that I absolutely love. I ask every guest this question, and I just love the answers that I'm getting out of it.
Okay.
We've all heard of a physical first aid box, right? Something in which you would keep your painkillers, antiseptic, etc., for those minor cuts and bruises when you don't need a doctor. But what if you were to keep a mental first aid box? Something that would make you smile on those low days, something which would just make you happy. Open it and you're happy. What would you put in it?
That's so interesting. Like, it's a nice way to think about what you're grateful for as well. Actually, my answer is very simple for this. So, three things. One would be videos of my dog with my husband and my parents and my brother.
Okay.
So, I have a golden retriever. His name is Brownie. And he is the goofiest, cutest little baby, dog baby, not human baby. And I think if I didn't have access to the human beings specifically, I would look at these videos because they genuinely make me smile so much. The second thing would probably be, so I journal a lot,
Okay.
and now it's become like as I go when I can. I don't put a pressure there, but I often like go back to my older journals. So where you've written like, I want my salary to be 50,000 rupees. I want to be 4-star appraisal, like all of that.
Right.
I want to afford like my first luxury lipstick. So when I look back at those things and I see how far I've come, it always makes me smile because this is something my Nanaji used to say. What man has done, man can do. So I look back at that and I'm like, oh, at that point, this seemed insurmountable, but we got here. So of course, like whatever is bringing you down right now, you'll overcome it or you'll process it and you'll get past it. So that would be number two. And the third one is slightly brings me a bit of embarrassment. Is this playlist I have? It's
Okay.
Shreya Home Party. And
Okay.
this has वो सारे गाने जो आप होली के दिन या जब आप लॉन्ग ड्राइव पे होते हैं you play at full blast. And this includes a bit of Haryanvi music. It includes a lot of like Enrique. That playlist always gets me to dance. Like I can't stop myself. And when you dance, it releases all the good hormones and you feel better about your day and life. So yeah, these
How
three
nice.
things.
The most underrated therapy. Yeah, this is fabulous.
Yeah, like there's some old songs, right? Like which are embedded in your head as party music because you only
Yes.
ever heard them at like these parties. Yeah,
Correct.
always make me dance.
How nice. I love this box. It's clear, it's concise, it's crisp. I can almost physically imagine it. Please make one and please keep it with you.
I will. Actually, yeah, I should. Thank you. Validation from a psychologist as good as you. Little Shreya is so happy right now.
How fun. Okay, let's get into the rapid fire round.
Ooh,
No
okay.
thinking, no retakes. Okay, we're going to answer quick. Your favorite book.
Right now it's Wellness by Nathan Hill.
Okay, your favorite movie character.
None. I don't watch too many movies. Sorry.
Okay, your biggest pet peeve.
Judging people on the basis of their taste without any understanding of why they have those tastes.
Okay, the one thing you believed in but no longer do.
Interesting. I always believed that I was lovable only when I achieved things. I no longer do that.
Wow, that's profound. Your most prized possession.
That book I told you about, my mom got me this book of old Russian fairy tales.
Hmm.
And she got them for me when I was either 6 or 7. Those are really like my prized possessions. I have carried them from posting to posting. I'm a 4G kid. They're still in pristine condition. I go back to them ever so often. Love them. Most prized possession.
Priceless. Before we come to an end of this conversation, Shreya, I honestly don't want it to end, but is there a question that you have for me as a psychologist?
Yes, ma'am. I do.
Go ahead.
Okay. So there's one thing I've observed a lot in the last, I'd say, post-COVID actually, which is we have our phones with us and we're constantly on the internet. We're also constantly posting stuff and documenting everything and sharing everything. And I feel like when we look back upon these things, are we becoming better at understanding ourselves? Or are we just becoming better at performing introspection? Like, I see so many people use therapy speak for something as basic as, oh my God, trauma. This memification, this speaking like a therapist, but actually your actions show that you have no self-awareness. Like, why is this happening? What's happening? Is it good? Is it bad? Like, what do you feel as a psychologist about this, performed introspection? Or are we actually becoming aware and it's absolutely fine to talk like this? Like, what are your thoughts?
I'm so glad somebody asked this question because
Okay.
I have been up in arms against people who are trying to, like you said, make it a meme or make it so simple that it doesn't feel important anymore. So, yes, we needed to lift the taboo. We needed at one point to be able to talk about anxiety, trauma, fear, negative emotions because society did not allow it for a very long time. But now we've suddenly gone to the other end and we are now talking about it as if it doesn't matter. So that, every teenager is saying, oh my God, did you see the paper today? I'm traumatized. And they're not talking about the newspaper, they're talking about some test paper. So they don't genuinely know what trauma feels like, but they are talking about it as if theek hai. So now, how will they find a better word or how will they find new vocabulary when, God forbid, they really experience some kind of trauma? How will this generation then experience or explain what they're going through? Because they've suddenly started playing with a lot of emotions. They'll say, oh, this is my childhood trauma. Oh, this is something that I carry from. They started talking about emotions of Freudian language became very common. Suddenly people are talking about the Oedipal complex as if, it was nothing. And I'm always wondering what is going to happen. So, personally, I don't work with children, I work with adults only. But
Right.
I'm very curious to see how, when this generation comes into adulthood and when they come in for therapy, what is the language they're going to use, or what is the language I'm going to use to convey the seriousness of what happened to them. Like PTSD is a beautiful explanation of what your mind goes through in a very, very traumatic state.
Right.
It's amazing when a patient understands it and has that insight. But I have only this vocabulary. Now, if somebody is using PTSD casually or using trauma casually, I'm going to be at a loss trying to explain to this generation, okay, this is what happened, this is what is happening, and this is how we will overcome it. So, yeah, either us psychologists will have to up our vocabulary or we'll have to encourage kids to start using simpler words and not use words only for glamour and glorification of a simple thought.
Wow. I never thought about how it would require a fundamental change in the way therapy is engaged in. Because, yeah, it, I'm also like chronically online, and in 2023, I think had the most extensive round of therapy because I was burnt out. And to, I almost feel like I'm reaching that age where you're like, तुमने कहाँ trauma देखा हमने देखा है. And
Right.
then you go back to your father who's like, तुम थोड़ा ना स्कूल जाते थे, तो नैया चला माउंटेन क्रॉस करके स्कूल पहुंच.
Absolutely. The cliches will always exist. We'll make our own cliches, but we won't be free of them.
Yeah, oh my God, so profound. But like, sorry, I have one more follow up to this then.
Go ahead.
Let's say I am raised on a diet of like these kinds of memes. How then would you advise me to distinguish, like at least in my own head, like not everything needs therapy. You should be able to self-regulate. You should have some degree of self-awareness. How do I build that if all around me people are constantly memifying genuine therapy to speak? Like, how
So I
can I
think
build my internal radar?
it's very simple. You as a person are very fond of clarity, right? Through this conversation, we figured that you work on facts, you work on logic. So for all those people who are working on facts and logic, it's simple, create red flags. understand what these red flag words are. For example, I teach my teenage girls that y'all say it very easily that, oh my God, I want to die. But don't say that, because if somebody in a conversation tells you that they've had a suicidal thought or they want to kill themselves or they're talking about self harm, dig deeper. Don't ignore it as something in vocabulary which is easily used. Ask them, do they need something? Do they need someone? Are they at risk? And I said, this is where now you have to evolve to. We have done the basic steps, we've understood our emotions as children, but now we need to understand other people's emotions as well. So, certain red flags, like if somebody says that they have not been able to get out of bed, instead of labeling them
Yeah.
as lazy or, somebody who's not motivated or, oh, you're procrastinating, ask them, is something wrong? Is something emotionally disturbing? Is something affecting their mood, their food, their sleep cycle? And then see if they need help beyond you. So, these are red flags. We need to establish that, okay, beyond this, we have to use the right words. And up till here, theek hai, it's all in fun and games. We can't obviously shame a whole generation for the language they're using.
Absolutely not. I mean, I personally use that, oh my God, I could die today. And I
Exactly.
know, and my friends know, and my parents know that it is said in jest. But if I were to tell them exactly what you said, my God, कि आज तो मैंने खाना ही नहीं खाया, मेरा मन ही नहीं कर रहा, and your voice also adapts that slightly downturn way
Yeah.
of saying. That's when, like, I think my husband or my mom's ears prick up, and they're like, first things first, please eat a banana, go for a walk for 5 minutes, come back, and then tell, are you feeling better or is it the same? And then I'm like, okay, doing. Yeah.
Right. So I think our emotional quotient is also changing. Our EQs are evolving, our IQs are evolving. We're all adapting. I think we're constantly adapting. The previous generation probably adapted, at a slower pace. They didn't need to. But we, as, 35, 40-year-olds are adapting more, and the youngsters are adapting even more. So, well, this has been so tremendous, Shreya. Thank you so much for all your time, your insight, all the beautiful work you do. I would recommend your page, that is The Editor Recommends, on Instagram to everybody who's listening. Please follow it. Please see the content she's putting up because it is fabulous. You will definitely enjoy a book more after you listen to Shreya talk. So thank you, Shreya. Thank you for being with us. And I hope this episode reaches all the old readers, young readers, new readers, and old readers. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kinjal, for hosting me for these very fun questions and insightful questions. And thank you for giving an answer to the two questions I've had for a long time about the psychology of the young mind. It was a pleasure being here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shreya.